The dust swirled like ghosts around Clara Bennett's worn boots as she stumbled into Redemption Ridge, a frontier town carved into the Arizona desert like a wound that refused to heal. The year was 1876, and the sun beat down mercilessly on her dark traveling dress, now gray with trail dust. She clutched a crumpled telegram in her trembling hand, the one that had brought news of her father's death 3 weeks prior. Samuel Bennett, the town's beloved doctor, had left her everything, his medical practice, his modest house, and a mystery she was only beginning to unravel. Clara's corset dug into her ribs as she pushed through the saloon doors of the Silver Spur, the only establishment that seemed alive in the drowsy afternoon heat. Eyes turned toward her, hard eyes, curious eyes, predatory eyes. A woman alone in a saloon was either a fool or desperate. Clara was both. "I'm looking for Jacob Winters," she announced, her voice stronger than she felt. A man at the bar, all leather and silver stubble, jerked his thumb toward the back corner. There, in the shadows, sat a man who looked like he'd been carved from the same unforgiving stone as the mountains surrounding the town. Jacob Winters had dark hair touched with premature gray at the temples, a scar running from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, and eyes the color of storm clouds. He didn't stand when she approached. Didn't even look up from the whiskey glass he was turning slowly between his calloused fingers. "Mr. Winters," Clara began, "I'm Clara Bennett. Samuel Bennett's daughter. I believe you knew my father." Now he looked up, and something flickered across his face, pain, perhaps, or regret. "Knew him well. Sorry for your loss. He was a good man. He left me a letter," Clara said, pulling a worn envelope from her pocket. "He said if anything happened to him, I should find you. He said you were the only man in this godforsaken town worth trusting." Jacob's jaw tightened. He took the letter, read it silently, then folded it with deliberate care. When he looked at her again, there was a wariness in his expression. "Your father made enemies, Miss Bennett. Powerful ones. The Silver Crown Mining Company has been trying to buy up every piece of land in this valley, and your father stood in their way. He owned the water rights to Copper Creek, the only reliable water source for miles. Without that water, their mining operation can't expand. So they killed him." Clara's voice broke despite her determination to stay strong. "Can't prove it. But Luke Harrigan, the man who runs Silver Crown, doesn't take kindly to obstacles. Your father's death was ruled an accident, thrown from his horse. But Samuel Bennett was the best horseman I ever knew." Clara sank into the chair across from Jacob, suddenly feeling the weight of every mile she traveled from Boston. "The telegram said he'd arranged for my transportation here. That there was an inheritance. I thought I'd sell the practice and the house, settle his affairs, and return home. You can't go back, Miss Bennett. Not yet." Jacob leaned forward, his voice low and urgent. "Harrigan knows about you. He knows that inheritance includes those water rights. If you sell to anyone but him, or if you refuse to sell at all, you're in danger. Then what am I supposed to do?" Jacob studied her for a long moment, something calculating in his gaze. "There might be a way. It won't be easy, and it'll require you to trust me completely. I don't even know you." "No," he agreed. "But your father did. And that'll have to be enough." Jacob led Clara through the dusty streets to a small law office above the general store. The lawyer, a nervous man named Pemberton, shuffled through papers with ink-stained fingers. "Ah, yes, Miss Bennett. Your father's will is quite clear. The property, including the water rights, passes to you. However," he cleared his throat uncomfortably, "there is a complication." "What complication?" Clara demanded. "The town charter, established in 1869, has a rather unusual provision. Any unmarried woman who inherits significant property must either sell it within 30 days or, well, marry. It was meant to ensure that properties remained productive and protected. A frontier provision, you understand, from rougher times. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. That's barbaric. Surely it can't be enforced. It is the law here, Miss Bennett, Pemberton said apologetically. And Mr. Harrigan has already filed a petition to enforce it. If you don't marry within 30 days, which started from your father's death, giving you now only 9 days remaining, the property will be put up for auction. And I'm afraid Mr. Harrigan has the deepest pockets in the territory. Clara turned to Jacob, fury and desperation warring in her chest. You knew about this. I did, he admitted. That's why I said there was a way. Understanding dawned on her like cold water. No. Absolutely not. Hear me out. You want me to marry you? A complete stranger? This is insane. Jacob's expression remained calm, maddeningly so. It's a business arrangement, Miss Bennett. Nothing more. We marry on paper, you keep your inheritance and your father's legacy, and once the dust settles and Harrigan moves on to easier prey, we can have it quietly annulled. You can return to Boston or stay here and run the practice, whatever you choose. And what do you get out of this generous offer? Clara asked suspiciously. Your father saved my life once, Jacob said quietly. I owe him a debt I can never repay. Keeping you safe, keeping his life's work out of Harrigan's hands, that's payment enough. Clara walked to the window, looking out over the town that was now somehow hers. Below, she could see rough men and tired women, children playing in the dusty streets, the whole desperate, beautiful mess of frontier life. Her father had loved this place, had given everything to it. If I agree, she said slowly, I need your word that this is purely a legal arrangement. I need to know the terms. You'll have your own room in your father's house. I'll stay in the clinic, there's a back room where your father sometimes slept during emergencies. We'll present as a married couple in public, but in private, you have my word as a gentleman that your privacy and dignity will be respected absolutely. Clara laughed bitterly. A gentleman? In a place like this? Your father thought so. That's going to have to be enough. She turned back to him, searching his scarred face for any sign of deception. All she found was a bone-deep weariness and something that might have been honor. I need to see the house first, she said. I need to understand what I'm fighting for. The house was smaller than Clara had imagined, a simple 2-story structure with peeling white paint and a porch that sagged slightly on one side. But inside, it was full of her father's presence. Medical books lined the shelves, his reading glasses sat on a side table, and his coat still hung on a hook by the door. Clara touched the coat sleeve, and suddenly she was crying, all the grief she'd held back during the long journey finally breaking through. She felt Jacob's presence behind her but was grateful that he didn't try to comfort her with empty words. He simply stood there, a solid presence, until the storm passed. I'm sorry, she whispered, wiping her eyes. Don't be. He deserves your tears. He was worth them. She explored the house while Jacob waited downstairs. The main bedroom was clearly her father's, simple, functional, with medical journals stacked beside the bed. The second bedroom was smaller, with a single bed and a handmade quilt. A guest room, perhaps, or meant for a child he'd never had since her mother had died giving birth to Clara. When she returned downstairs, she found Jacob in the kitchen, surprisingly competent as he prepared coffee. There's a problem, Clara said, her voice steadier now. For this to be believable, for Harrigan to not challenge the marriage as fraudulent, we need to actually live as husband and wife. At least in appearance. Jacob poured the coffee, his movements careful. I meant what I said about your privacy. I know. But think about it. In a town this size, everyone knows everyone's business. If we maintain completely separate living quarters, if we're never seen together, if there's no appearance of genuine affection, Harrigan will claim the marriage is a sham to circumvent the law. Which it is, but he can't prove it. What are you suggesting? Clara took a deep breath. We need to make this convincing. We need to be seen together, to present as an actual couple. And that means, sharing the house properly. I'll take the main bedroom. You'll need to at least appear to share it. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. Miss Bennett. Clara. If we're going to do this, you should call me Clara. Clara, he said, and she liked the way her name sounded in his rough voice. I won't pretend this isn't complicated. But I give you my word. I know, she interrupted. I believe you. But there's something else. Tonight, there's a town gathering at the church. A wake for my father, apparently. They've been waiting for me to arrive. Everyone will be there, including Harrigan. If we're going to do this, we should announce our engagement tonight. Strike while we have the element of surprise. Jacob set down his coffee cup. That's smart. Doesn't give him time to maneuver. But are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. Not easily. I'm sure, Clara said, surprised to find it was true. My father built something here. He helped people, saved lives. I won't let some greedy robber baron destroy that for profit. Then we do it tonight. But Clara, you should know what you're up against. Harrigan isn't just greedy. He's dangerous. He has the sheriff in his pocket, and half the town council. Men who've stood up to him have had accidents, or their businesses have mysteriously burned down. If he sees you as an obstacle, then he'll see both of us as obstacles, Clara finished. We face him together. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, Clara faced a peculiar problem. She'd been traveling for weeks and had only the dusty, worn dress she'd arrived in. For tonight's gathering, for the announcement that would change everything, she needed to look like a woman worthy of being Samuel Bennett's daughter, a woman worthy of making a stand. She stood in her father's bedroom, staring at her worn carpetbag with its meager contents, when she heard a soft knock. Clara? Jacob's voice came through the door. I found something. Can I come in? Yes. He entered carrying a wooden trunk, his expression almost shy. Your father kept this. Your mother's things. He couldn't bear to part with them. With trembling hands, Clara opened the trunk. Inside were dresses from another era, carefully preserved. Her mother's wedding dress, several day dresses, and, she caught her breath, a beautiful deep blue gown that would have been suitable for evening wear even in Boston. She was about your size, Jacob said quietly. Your father used to talk about her. How she'd come west with him, gave up everything for his dream of bringing medicine to the frontier. Clara lifted the blue dress, and the question came unbidden, where should I undress? The house had no separate dressing room, and the bedroom suddenly felt intimate with Jacob standing there. Jacob's answer was immediate and firm, I'll wait downstairs. Take all the time you need. This is your home, Clara. You don't need permission to exist in it. It was such a simple answer, but it carried a weight of respect that Clara hadn't expected. As he turned to leave, she called out, Jacob. He paused at the door. Thank you. For all of this. For honoring my father's memory. Haven't done anything yet worth thanking, he said. But I will. That's a promise. The church was packed when they arrived. Clara wore her mother's blue dress, altered hastily with stitches that would need to be redone later, and Jacob had surprised her by appearing in a clean suit that made him look almost civilized, though the gun belt he wore beneath the jacket reminded her this was still the Wild West. Every head turned as they entered together. Clara could feel the weight of curious stares, calculating glances, and outright hostility from some quarters. Jacob's hand found the small of her back, a gesture of support and possession that didn't go unnoticed. The minister, a kind-faced man named Reverend Walsh, greeted her warmly. Miss Bennett. Your father was a pillar of this community. His loss is deeply felt. Thank you, Reverend. He loved it here. Loved helping people. That he did. The Reverend's eyes flicked to Jacob, a question in them. Before Clara could respond, a voice cut through the murmur of conversation like a knife. Well, well. The prodigal daughter arrives at last. Luke Harrigan was everything Clara had expected and worse. Tall, well-dressed, with cold blue eyes and a smile that never reached them. He moved through the crowd like a shark through water, people parting before him. Mr. Harrigan, Clara said coolly. Please, call me Luke. After all, we'll be doing business together soon. He extended his hand. Clara didn't take it. I'm not sure what business you're referring to. Why, the sale of your father's property, of course. I've prepared a very generous offer. More than fair, considering the complications of a woman trying to manage such affairs alone. I'm not alone, Clara said, and she felt Jacob shift slightly beside her. And I'm not selling. Harrigan's smile thinned. Miss Bennett, I don't think you understand the realities of your situation. The law requires. I understand the law perfectly, Mr. Harrigan. Clara raised her voice slightly, ensuring that everyone in the church could hear. Which is why I'm pleased to announce my engagement to Mr. Jacob Winters. We'll be married within the week. The silence was absolute. Then the church erupted in whispers, gasps, and a few scattered sounds of approval. Clara saw shock on Harrigan's face, quickly masked, and then something darker, calculation. How convenient, Harrigan said slowly. A whirlwind romance. How did you two meet, exactly? Through my father's letters, Clara said smoothly, the lie coming easier than she'd expected. We've been corresponding for nearly a year. Jacob and my father were close friends. It seemed natural. Natural, Harrigan repeated. Or calculated. I wonder what Judge Morrison will think about a marriage clearly designed to circumvent the intent of the law. Jacob spoke for the first time, his voice low and dangerous. Are you suggesting that a woman has no right to marry whom she chooses, Harrigan? That sounds like the kind of argument that might not sit well with the good people of this town. Several women in the crowd murmured agreement. Harrigan's eyes narrowed. Of course not. I'm simply concerned for Miss Bennett's welfare. Mr. Winters has a complicated past. Perhaps she's not fully aware of the man she's binding herself to. Try me, Clara said before Jacob could respond. Tell me all about the man my father trusted with his daughter's safety. Tell me why my father, who was the best judge of character I've ever known, called him the only man in this town worth trusting. Harrigan's mask of civility was cracking. Your father was a good man but naive. He didn't understand how business works in the territory. He stood in the way of progress, of prosperity for everyone. He stood in the way of your greed, Clara cut him off. There's a difference. The crowd was fully attentive now, the wake forgotten in favor of this drama. Reverend Walsh stepped forward, sensing trouble. Perhaps this isn't the time or place for such discussions, he said gently. Tonight is about remembering Samuel Bennett, a man who gave this town everything. You're right, Reverend, Clara said, not breaking eye contact with Harrigan. My father deserves better than this. Mr. Harrigan, you know where to find me if you have legitimate business to discuss. Otherwise, I'd appreciate if you'd respect this gathering. Harrigan stared at her for a long moment, then smiled that cold smile again. Of course, Miss Bennett. My apologies for the disturbance. Enjoy your celebration. He tipped his hat and walked out, but Clara could feel the threat lingering like smoke. The wake proceeded, and Clara found herself surrounded by people who had known and loved her father. They shared stories, of babies he'd delivered, injuries he'd treated, lives he'd saved. Each story was a gift, a piece of the father she'd known so little about in his later years. An elderly woman named Mrs. Chen took Clara's hands in hers. Your father delivered both my children. Sat with me through 2 days of labor with the first. Never complained, never left my side. This town owes him everything. Then help me keep his legacy alive, Clara said impulsively. Don't let Harrigan destroy what my father built. Mrs. Chen's eyes were fierce despite her age. You have our support, child. All of us who remember what it was like before men like Harrigan showed up. We'll stand with you. Others echoed her sentiment, and Clara felt a warmth spreading through her chest, not just grief, but purpose. Later, as she and Jacob walked home under a sky full of stars, she finally allowed herself to process what had happened. You made an enemy tonight, Jacob said quietly. We made an enemy, Clara corrected. You're in this now too. I was always in it. From the moment your father asked me to look after you if anything happened to him. He paused. That wasn't entirely true, what I said before. About just honoring a debt. Clara stopped walking. What do you mean? Jacob's face was shadowed, but his voice was clear. Your father saved my life, yes. But he did more than that. He gave me a reason to have a life worth saving. Before I met him, I was lost. Angry. Violent. I'd done things I'm not proud of. He showed me another way. Showed me that being strong didn't mean being brutal. What happened? How did he save you? I was working for Harrigan. Security, they called it. Enforcement is what it really was. Roughing up people who didn't want to sell, burning out homesteaders. Your father was treating a family we'd been sent to persuade. When he saw what we'd done. Jacob's voice tightened. He looked at me like I was something he'd scraped off his boot. And I felt it. Really felt it for the first time, the weight of what I'd become. But you changed. He gave me the chance to. Harrigan sent me to threaten him, to make him stop interfering. Instead, your father talked to me. 4 hours. About right and wrong, about what kind of man I wanted to be. Then Harrigan found out I'd failed to handle him. Sent men to kill us both. Your father took a bullet meant for me. I got us both out alive, but barely. Clara processed this, understanding dawning. That's where the scar came from. Part of it. The rest came later, when I settled accounts with the men Harrigan sent. Your father patched me up again, physically and otherwise. Made me his assistant, taught me about healing instead of hurting. Gave me purpose. He had a gift for that, Clara said softly. Seeing what people could be, not just what they were. They reached the house, and the reality of their situation settled over them. They would sleep under the same roof tonight, bound by a promise and a lie that was becoming something more complicated. The days before the wedding blurred together in a strange domestic routine. Jacob slept in the clinic's back room as promised, but his presence in Clara's life grew in unexpected ways. He taught her about the town, introduced her to patients who needed care, and showed her the records her father had kept, meticulous notes on every person he treated. Clara discovered she had a gift for medicine, perhaps inherited from her father. Her hands were steady when setting bones, her voice calm when comforting the frightened or injured. Jacob watched her work with something like wonder. You're like him, he said one evening as they cleaned instruments together. Not just in skill, but in, you care. Really care. Is that so surprising? In my experience. Yes. The wedding was small, held at the same church where the wake had been. Mrs. Chen and a few other townspeople attended, but most notable was Judge Morrison, there to ensure the marriage was legal and binding. Clara wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit. When she walked down the aisle and saw Jacob waiting, clean-shaven, solemn, and somehow both dangerous and gentle, her heart did something unexpected. It skipped. The ceremony was brief. Reverend Walsh spoke about commitment and love, words that felt both hollow and prophetic. When it came time for the vows, Jacob's voice was steady, but Clara saw his hands tremble slightly as he slid the simple gold band onto her finger. I do, she said, and meant it in ways she hadn't anticipated. The kiss that sealed their marriage was chaste, brief, but Clara felt it down to her toes. At the reception, just cake and coffee in the church hall, Harrigan appeared like a dark cloud. "Congratulations," he said, his voice dripping with false cheer. "Though I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news. The territorial governor has agreed to review the circumstances of your marriage. If it's found to be fraudulent, entered into solely to circumvent the law, it will be annulled and the property will still go to auction." "We expected this," Jacob said calmly. "We welcome the review." Harrigan's smile was poisonous. "Do you?" "Because I've hired investigators, Mrs. Winters. They'll be watching you. Every moment, every interaction. If this marriage is the sham I suspect, they'll find proof." Clara stepped forward, close enough to see the pores on Harrigan's face. "Then they'll be disappointed. This marriage is real in every way that matters. My father trusted Jacob with his life. I'm trusting him with mine. That's more real than any business transaction you've ever made." After Harrigan left, Clara and Jacob returned to the house that was now legally theirs together. The reality of their situation hit Clara as she stood in the bedroom doorway. "I meant what I said," Jacob murmured behind her. "I'll sleep in the clinic." "No," Clara said, surprising herself. "That won't work. Harrigan will have people watching. If you're never here at night, if we're never seen together as husband and wife should be, he'll use it against us." "Clara. There's a solution. A compromise." She turned to face him. "The bedroom is large enough. We can hang a curtain, divide the space. You'll have your privacy, I'll have mine, but if anyone looks in the windows or asks questions, we're sharing the room as married couples do." Jacob studied her for a long moment. "You've thought this through." "I've thought about little else. This has to be convincing, Jacob. Not just for the law, but for the town. My father's legacy depends on it." They spent the evening hanging a heavy curtain across the middle of the room, creating two separate spaces. It was awkward and strange, and yet there was something almost domestic about the task, working together toward a common goal. That first night, lying in her bed with only a curtain separating her from a man she barely knew but was legally bound to, Clara couldn't sleep. She listened to Jacob's breathing on the other side of the divide, steady and deep. "Jacob," she whispered. "Yeah. Thank you. For doing this. For being honorable." A long pause. "Ask me in a month if I'm still being honorable. Being this close to you, knowing I can't, it's going to be harder than I thought." Clara's breath caught. "What do you mean?" "Nothing. Forget I said anything. Good night, Clara." But she couldn't forget. His words echoed in her mind, suggesting feelings she hadn't dared to consider. This was supposed to be business, a temporary arrangement. But something was shifting between them, something dangerous and thrilling. The weeks that followed established a pattern. By day, they worked together, Clara learning medicine from her father's notes and Jacob's practical experience, treating everyone from children with fevers to minors with broken bones. By night, they maintained their careful separation, the curtain between them both a barrier and a temptation. But slowly, inevitably, the barriers began to crumble. It started with small things. Jacob bringing Clara coffee in the morning, prepared exactly how she liked it. Clara mending his shirt when she noticed a tear. Shared meals where they talked about everything and nothing, her childhood in Boston, his rough upbringing in Texas, dreams they'd both given up and ones they were discovering. One evening, Clara was struggling with a particularly difficult medical text when Jacob appeared with 2 glasses of whiskey. "Your father's private stock," he said. He'd save it for when he needed to think through a hard problem. They sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. Clara sipped the whiskey and felt it burn pleasantly down her throat. "Do you ever regret it?" Jacob asked quietly. "Giving up Boston, your life there, for this?" "I didn't have much of a life there," Clara admitted. "I was a spinster daughter, living on the charity of relatives who made it clear I was a burden. Here, I'm useful. I matter. You matter, Jacob echoed. More than you know. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Clara felt the pull, the dangerous attraction she'd been denying for weeks. This isn't supposed to happen, she whispered. No, Jacob agreed. It's not. But neither of them moved away. The crisis came 3 months after their wedding. Clara was treating a young girl with pneumonia, fighting to save her life through long nights of careful nursing. Jacob stayed by her side, helping however he could. On the 3rd night, the girl's fever finally broke. Clara, exhausted and emotionally drained, stumbled. Jacob caught her, and suddenly she was in his arms, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. I couldn't have done this without you, she said. Yes, you could have. You're the strongest person I know. Then why do I feel so weak right now? Because being strong doesn't mean you don't need someone to lean on. Clara looked up at him, at the scarred face that had become so dear to her, and made a decision. Jacob, I don't want the curtain anymore. His breath caught. Clara, you don't know what you're saying. You're tired. I'm saying that this hasn't been pretend for me for a long time. Maybe it never was. I'm saying that somewhere between the wedding and now, this became real. It's been real for me since the moment I saw you walk into that saloon, Jacob confessed. Covered in dust, scared but trying not to show it, ready to fight the world for something you believed in. I've been in love with you since that first day, and every day since has just made it worse. Clara's heart soared. Then why the distance? Why the careful separation? Because I gave you my word. Because you deserve better than a man with blood on his hands and a past he's not proud of. Because. She kissed him, cutting off his protests. It was nothing like their wedding kiss. This was fire and need and months of denied longing finally unleashed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jacob rested his forehead against hers. Are you sure? He whispered. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. That night, the curtain came down. Not just the physical one, but all the barriers they'd built between them. This marriage, begun as a legal fiction, became real in the truest sense. 6 months later, Clara stood in the clinic treating patients with Jacob by her side. Harrigan's investigators had found nothing because there was nothing to find, just a married couple building a life together, working to serve their community. The water rights remained with Clara, and when drought threatened the town, she negotiated a fair agreement that allowed the mining company access while protecting the rights of homesteaders and townspeople. It wasn't what Harrigan wanted, but it was just, and the territorial governor approved it. Harrigan eventually moved on to easier prey, and Redemption Ridge flourished. The clinic expanded. Clara discovered she was pregnant. Jacob was building them a larger house on the hill overlooking the town. One evening, as they sat on their new porch watching the sunset, Clara thought about that first day. How she'd walked into the saloon desperate and afraid. How a simple question, where should I undress? Had led to Jacob's answer that showed her who he really was. What are you thinking about? Jacob asked, his hand finding hers. How one answer can change everything, Clara said. How showing respect when it would have been easy not to, how choosing honor over opportunity, can be the foundation of everything good. Jacob pulled her close. Your father once told me that how a man treats a woman in her most vulnerable moments shows his true character. I tried to live up to that. You did more than that, Clara said. You showed me what love looks like. Real love, not the fairy tale kind. The kind that's built on respect and trust and choosing each other every day. As the sun set over Redemption Ridge, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Clara reflected on her journey. She'd come west expecting to settle her father's affairs and leave. Instead, she'd found a home, a purpose, and a love that had started with a lie but had become the truest thing in her life. Sometimes fate arrives wearing the dust of the trail. Sometimes it shows up in a scarred face and careful hands. And sometimes, it all hinges on how a man answers one simple question, with respect, with honor, with the kind of decency that becomes the foundation of everything that follows. The Wild West had been wild indeed, but in the end, it had given Clara everything she'd never known she needed. And it all began with Jacob's answer, the one that changed her fate forever.